Thank you everybody for being here. I am Lorenzo, and today I will like to drive you and dig into the prototyping world. And I will like to introduce you how my experience taught me how to adapt to the different circumstances and the different stakeholders you may be involved with, and you may relate to, and choose your prototyping technique and prototyping accordingly. So it's going to be a quick guide, and I will give you like a little bit of introduction about myself. I am, as I said, Lorenzo. I am an interaction designer working currently for Sketchin, and I have been working in this field as interaction and user experience designer for the past 6 years, more or less. Nevertheless, my background hasn't always be as a digital in the digital world. I started as a product designer, and so I studied product design, so actual physical products. But I soon learned how, when I moved to the digital world, I learned how the two things are actually quite similar to each other. Like things for product design, they can be very well applied also for the digital world, and within this category, it also fits the prototyping, the whole prototyping world. Why are we talking, and why I would like to talk about the prototyping part? Because I believe is really important as designing. Like once you are done with your static screen, with designing your components, your screens, that's just a part of the job. What you need to do is to connect the dots, is to make your designs alive, to make them way more understandable for people that are seeing and using it. And to design also inputs and feedbacks. That's what all the prototyping in the end is. And it also may help you to uncover unexpected paths, unexpected features that you may have not thought about in the beginning. So it's helpful double ways. But besides that, prototyping is also a fundamental tool and plays a fundamental role in the design process. And I have distinguished two main, let's say, groups. Where the prototyping plays a very big role. The first one is when you want to communicate something, which is your designs, when you want to communicate what you meant with your screens, and when you want to deliver a message. And delivering a message means also picking the right target and picking the right tools to deliver that message the most effective way. And when you want to test what you design, so when you want to use your prototyping as a tool, as a means to test what you actually design. And whether to check that every time works as planned, and like it never does. Most of the time, it never does. Let's start with the first group. So let's do the first part, the communicating. So what I want to highlight is it's very important to pick the right target in the right moment and deliver the message you want to deliver. And it's important to prototype according to the different situations, the right animation, the right transition, the right feedback that you want to have from the system, and up to the different stakeholders to understand, build, and eventually also use your product. So when do you prototype in terms of in a timeline when you use it to communicate something? In the very first part, I simplify like the design process in these three main stages. And the very first moment is when you want, in a way, to surprise your client. You want to convince him that you are the perfect designer for him in that moment. So you are able to think out of the box. You are creative. So when you want to show your capabilities and you want to have a deal with him, to win the deal. Eventually, once you got the client, you're going to use your prototypes to review your work. So it's much more effective if you instead of showing the static screens, you show an actual prototype. Is way more efficient to deliver a certain message, and it may happen in daily, weekly, or monthly design reviews that you may have with your client. And finally, when you want to submit your project, so when you want to deliver everything you design, everything you worked on, and you want someone else to take over and take what you design and make it a real product. So when you want to submit it essentially to the developers, that's to put their hands on it. So as I said, it's really important. So define these three moments. Then it's very much important to know the target you're talking to. So these three moments are always related to a specific target. The first one is the client, then it comes to the developers, and then it comes to the users eventually. So let's start with the client. And when talking about the clients, it's very important to distinguish in two main moments. In the very first one, when I say that you want to, in a way, impress them, when you want to convince them that you are able to solve their problems and to find a creative solution for their problem. And in this moment, you need something that, in a way, doesn't have to be fully structured. It has to be a prototype, like with animations, maybe, that can, in a way, show your capabilities, what potentially you can achieve. That's in the very first part. Once you actually start building a relationship with them, so you got them, you convince them, and you want to build and start building and make sense to your design, then you can be a bit more simple. You should go more about the flows and like to connect your screens. So it's much more efficient, as I was saying before, to show a certain path or a certain flow you design or you thought of by using prototypes instead of showing them different screens one after the other. As an example, like you have 3 screens which happen to in a sequence when you do a certain time of click on a button or something like that. It's way more efficient if you actually, and understandable if you actually show them a simple prototype. It can be done with InVision. It's just a simple click and go to the next screen. So here you have to be sure you keep it simple, you make it very clear what you're communicating. So it's very important that you explain what you want to design. Just remember they are not you and they are not in mind, and no one is actually. So it's for you may be obvious what you are telling. For others, it's always remember that it's not that obvious. The second group and the second target I want to talk about is the developers. And here you need a kind of different kind of prototype, because once you are, for instance, delivering your product, so you are handing it over to the developers that actually have to build it, you have to be very, very precise, because you have to design every single animation, hover effect, kind of transition, etc. Remember, everything you don't design, it will be designed by someone else. And this is because, like, in a way, if you don't show how a certain feedback is received by the users, someone else is going to design for you. When you put so much effort on a work, you may want to put attention also on that. And always, like, we used to write functional specification to tell, like, oh, this thing works in a certain way. But I believe, and I learned how showing it is way more efficient than actually just writing it. So, like, if you can make your prototype in a way that you show the detail of the different feedbacks, the transition, animation, and etc., that's way more helpful than just writing it down. Here, what I usually do is, like, kind of create a mix of prototypes when I have to communicate to the developers. So essentially, I have to hand my project to the developer, because what I would like to do is, what I usually do is to create a prototype which is more architecture-wise oriented. So, like, you have a clear structures of your pages, clear connection between the pages. So from here you go to B to C to D, and it has to be super clear the path you're following. And I usually add specific animations or like specific videos can be also, like, to show how to display and to design a certain feedback, for instance, or a transition, as I said before. So he works also to mix different kind of prototypes sometimes. The last group, the last target is the users. And here I cheated a little bit, because it's not really that you're communicating directly to the users. You may pass through always to the developers, because in a way they are gonna put what you design in the final product. But it's I meant with the user, because you actually are using your feedbacks that you're prototyping, your transitions, your animation, everything that is actually interactive, to enhance your user experience. Like nowadays, users are very much used to very complex digital products, so they expect to be engaged all the time with their products. Like, they see animations and cool micro effects in every digital product they interact to, and they may also play a big role in the user experience. I mean, just a quick example. When you are in an e-commerce, for instance, and when you see a list of products, you select a product and you want to add it to the cart. Like what you do is actually clicking on the little heart or add to the cart on the CTA, and you see the dot moving from the bottom to the top. That's something that really communicates many things. So it communicates where you are going to find that product. So the product was there, and now you're going to find it on top of right corner. It also helps users to locate the cart in general. So not just where your product is, but to understand also that icon. The little dot may appear on top of that icon, like can communicate the fact there's actually something in there. So by just having this little transition, this little movement, and these little micro animations and micro interaction, really help your user experience to reach the next level, let's say. Where to start? Like it's important to not be software driven. Like what I would like and what I always try to do is to experiment with different software, not to stick with a single software, with a single tool because you may need different things, different tools according to the different situation. I explained to you, like here before I was telling you about how I usually build a structure prototype with something that is more like architectural oriented, and something that is way more animation or transition oriented. So like in these cases, it's very important that you try and you experiment with different tools. I have no tools in particular to suggest you. Like everyone has his own flow, has his own peculiarity, so you can try and find yourself what you are more comfortable with, and that's going to be the right one. But just not to be sticking in a single one, and always try to innovate and try new things, because nowadays there may be 5, 6 tools that are very great. Tomorrow there will be 12. In a year there will be 20. So like try always to explore and to find new tools and new softwares. The only parameters and criteria maybe you have to have in mind when you want to choose a tool for a specific moment, for a specific prototype, or for a specific target, as we say, is like time. So how much time you are going to need on that prototype, because there are software that are way more time consuming than others. The audience, so the target you're talking to, for the things we explained before. So be aware who is your target, who you are communicating the message to. The realism, so the level of fidelity you want to reach with your prototype. It can be basic, but it can be really complex, so almost looking as a final product. And the format, so like the output essentially, or your file you are using to deliver your message. Could be a movie, could be an HTML, could be many different things, or like an app. So this was for the first part of communicating, and we cover, let's say, what is to communicate for the stakeholders, like developers, clients, and users. But in the end, your final goal is to design for the users. So they are an active stakeholders because they have to be involved in your whole design process. And how you do it, how do you involve them, is by testing your products, is by gathering feedbacks for them. And you do it by letting them use your design through different kind of prototypes. When do you test? When testing your prototype, that's happen really anytime in the design process. We know it's an iterative process, and you can do it from the day 1, minute 2, when you started your process, to the very, very, very last day of your design process. And it's very important that you do often and many times as you can, because you will always find flaws and things that can be fixed. And you can do it in a very early stage where you have like simple, basic rectangles, and you want to understand how a specific transitions you had in mind, animation or scrolling you had in mind works, like super, super basic. Or when you have something way more advanced, complex, and you want to understand whether the whole feedbacks you are communicating, if it's not too overwhelming, also what you're trying to deliver, and etc. So what I like to say is, like, it's important to fail. Like, do not be scared of failing. It's actually you should be worried if you don't fail in a user test, because it may be that you miss something. It's very, very, very rare to get something right on the very first shot. And if you may have not found something that is not right, it's probably because you were not looking in the right place. So do not be scared of failing and continuously failing, because as we say, it's an iterative process. So you may fail in the beginning, you may fix some things, test it again, and fail it over and over. But that should, like, you should not see as a bad thing. It's actually a good one. And most importantly, you fail fast. It's very, very important that you do not postpone your test at the very end of the design process, because it will be way more painful to fix adjustments or to make adjustments or to edit your designs. So the sooner you do it, the quicker it will be for you to go to the right direction. While if you wait too long, it will be way more painful to go back, fix. It could be painful just for like the format you're using, the software you're using, but also for the amount of things you have designed so far and that you have to change. It is very important when you test and when you test a prototype through a prototype to know your final goal, because you may have different goals when testing a design. You may want to test to focus on certain specific parts. You may want to focus just on the user interface. So you may want to know whether your design looks good and understandable. You may want to focus on the architecture, so on the structure of your pages, on the interaction, on the data. For instance, on the user interface, as we say, like you want to know whether, okay, I see this loader, I understand what that means. I understand the different color, what they mean, the color coding, and the input for the validation behavior, what small components mean, like in the pages. Or like the architecture. So I want to be sure that you understand that you are navigating and your flow is from A to B to C to D, and D is related to A in a way, and what grade of hierarchy it has with the previous pages. And that you have to know what the structure once you navigate, when navigating your product, you will have to build that to understand the structure of the product you are navigating. The interaction. So as I say, like it's important that are perceived like things, elements that you design are perceived as interactive, and the feedbacks that you gain from them are communicated the right message. So the user doesn't misunderstand what you design or what you were trying to communicate. And finally, the data as another example, like it may be dependency of data you are designing. So you may want to test whether like in a complex or CRM like product, like you want to know whether the user understand that adding a certain data in a certain input fields has a consequence in another part of the pages, and understand that the consequence was really related to the data you just put in. And it can be like also like the whole validation process of a form. So like he's entering a certain time, like certain amount of data information, and they have to be validated, and then the user has to understand the whole part of validation, and that they are related to what data are validated and why something went wrong in case something went wrong. An important tip, what I usually do is like when I have any doubt about whether something could work or could not work in my designs, I usually prototype. Like I can be very quick and dirty. Like doesn't have to be very precise, but like if I want to know that something is working the way I am thinking, like I usually run a quick prototype about it. And when I mean quick, it should take like less than 30 minutes. If it takes longer than 30 minutes, it's not quick anymore. It may still be very dirty, but it's not gonna be quick. And also what I usually do is to try to split my prototype in pieces. So like do not try to achieve the perfect prototype when you have everything in a single file or in a single product, in a single flow. Is very, and I think it's much useful to have different, to split your prototype in different parts. So like you want to test or communicate, that also applies for the communicating the message. So you want to test or communicate a message and try to focus on that part. So maybe in the home page, you want to test how a certain interaction works. So, and if you also have design and prototype other parts, like differentiate the prototypes. Do not try to put everything in a single file, which is going to be way more complicated to and to edit if you have to edit something, and also for people that are receiving it to understand it, because if they have navigate a whole prototype that is fully interactive, they may get lost also in that prototype. Okay, just a few things to wrap up, and few things I would like you to remember about this presentation. And the first one is, do not be software driven. So as we say, like, try, experiment, and test out new tools, features, and because they can always make your life easier or better, and you can always find something more up to the date with what you want to try and design. According to the target, pick your target, prototype for them, and deliver the right message according to the target. So we saw like how the clients and the developers and the users, they need different kind of prototypes according to the situations. Do not be scared of failing, and do it fast. The sooner you fail, the better it is. And if you are failing, it's just a good thing, because you found something, room of improvement of your design, which is a good thing because you're gonna make it better than before. And divide your prototype in pieces. Like, do not try to achieve the super complex big guy with many different features, but like, you can split it in different parts and test or communicate them singularly. So that was it. Thank you very much. I hope you liked the presentation, and see you.